You're listening to the Chasing Tails Outdoor Podcast, where when you can't be in the outdoors, we bring it to you. Welcome back to another episode of the Chasing Tails Outdoor Podcast. My name is Walt, his name is Chase, and every week, almost without fail, we bring you outdoor content with one simple goal: to inspire you to get outside and chase your passions, or maybe even try something new. That's our only goal here. We have real modest expectations, and thus far, we seem to be doing so, and we're glad that you're here for another episode. We're going to be talking deer hunting. We're going to give you a Yakkin For Bass update. So if you want to get straight to the deer content and you don't want the Yakkin For Bass update, you probably want to fast forward about 10 minutes. That's about how long our intros go. But we're not going to go ad nauseum about the Yakkin thing. We're just going to kind of update everybody because there's still time to get in, win prizes, and have a good time doing it. But before we get to that, Chase, man, I had the pleasure of getting to see you here recently, man. And I got to say, dude, you're looking good, refreshed, and all is well now that school's behind you.
Yeah, I was refreshed then, but I'm paying for it today. Yeah, it was good, man. Met old Andy Thompson at one of the local lakes.
Yep.
And he brought me my deer head. He's the one that was working on my deer for me. So we made plans of hey, let's get together and fish, and I'll pick up the deer head. Did a phenomenal job on my deer. I couldn't ask for any better on that. And he put a whooping on me out on the water with catching all the fish that he caught on one of his honey holes. But I was able to put some fish on the board. Hopefully I get rid of both of those fish in a perfect world. But one of them I don't think I'll be getting rid of. It was a pretty good fish. But yeah, it was a good time, man. And you went out there. We're only out there for a couple of hours, and you got to upgrade yourself. So it was well worth the trip.
Man, when the fishing's right, dude. And, Andy is a guy that probably no one knows about unless they fished a tournament and suffered a loss at his defeat, maybe in the Georgia area. But, the guy is just a wealth of knowledge, and he has been remarkably kind in offering that knowledge to me, yourself as well, both deer hunting, bass fishing, everything. I mean, the guy's just one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. And I just want to say shout out to Andy for, hosting us again the other night because he's great company. He's kind of a softer spoken fella. He doesn't talk a lot, but when he talks, it tends to make you laugh. I mean, he's one of those guys. Maybe I just caught him when he was wore out after fishing with you all day, but that's been my experience with him. But it was a good time, man. And you're right. I was able to catch a couple fish right there despite the wind. There was a little lull in the wind, and I pulled a couple upgrades. So there are worse things.
Yeah, that was the only lull in the wind. Him and I were getting pretty much blown everywhere yesterday with the wind. Wasn't really planning on that, but we still caught some fish, had a good time, and he was Andy didn't have any problem catching fish, that's for sure. He was definitely and it shows because now he's at the top of the leaderboard of the Yakkin For Bass Challenge.
Yeah, and that's kind of exactly where we expected him to be. I mean, Andy he's an animal when it comes to bass fishing. He's got a system that works for him. And last year's winner, Adam Glass, has freely admitted that he's mortified of one person in this tournament, and it's Andy.
Yep. That's what I told Andy last night. I'm like, I said, Adam's going to be getting nervous when you start posting these fish.
Yeah.
On Tourney X.
Oh man, I love the Yakkin For Bass Challenge because it brings out that competitive spirit. And Adam is again fairly soft-spoken fella. He does not smack talk very well at all. He apologizes after he makes a joke, and it's funny to see that fire get lit in him whenever he talks about Andy. Man, he's like I gotta fish clean, man. I gotta start fishing clean, or I'm not gonna get these fish. I'm not gonna beat Andy.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy. I mean, he's in ministry, so that's what you would expect somebody.
Yeah.
In ministry where they're talking, and then if they are gonna talk smack, they kind of talk even quieter, like it's almost a whisper.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's all good time, good fun. Everybody's having a good time on our own little Marco Polo group that we got for the Yakkin For Bass Challenge. So Yesterday was the first day I've gotten out to fish, but I know I was watching Marco Polo, and there were quite a few of you guys that were on the water at midnight fishing, like minute one of the tournament.
Yeah, yeah, we were. Austin sends me a message and says basically like I might go fishing tonight, and then he committed to it, and then peer pressure kicked in, and I committed to it, and so at midnight he and I go fishing, and we think we're the only people out there. Adam Glass like Marco'd us, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to bed, guys, tucking myself in. He went to sleep for like 45 minutes, and then Nick Chandler picked him up from his house, and they were out there night fishing as well. So. The sad thing was it was a total bust. You're out there early, but it was a total bust. But we quickly remedied that in the coming days, and I think we've already had almost 100 fish submitted. By the way.
Oh wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's 4 days into the tournament.
That's real good.
Yeah.
We had some people get out to an early jump, which is normally the case, but it's a long grind. So there'll be, and there's a bunch of people looks like that haven't fished yet. So. That's the one thing is like you never know with this challenge. All it takes is one good day for somebody to go out, and next thing you know, they're at the top of the leaderboard.
Oh yeah, and even if they're at the top, I mean, I lost 5 fish right from the jump. There was a lull in the wind. I lost 5 fish. Changed my hook up. I had a little experimental hook set up. Didn't really care for it. The first one that I lost. Or one of the first ones I lost. I think you ended up losing as well. It was in the same general area. Super aggressive fish, hit really, really hard. I was sitting there in the top 4 or 5 up until last night, and in a span of an hour, I jumped up to first place just having caught those 2 fish that I did manage to land. So it doesn't take much, man. A hot hand, a hot hour. I mean, if you go out a couple times throughout the month of the tail end of May and the first half of June, you can get out there and be competitive.
Yeah. There's still plenty of time you can still sign up for the challenge. You got until the last day basically to sign up for the challenge, and there's 2 ways to win prizes. So even if you got that last day and catch a 23-inch fish, you could win the big bass for the tournament. So there's still a way for you to win, even if you can't fish right now. You can still get on a little bit later if you get some free time or whatever. You go, hey, I'm going to sign up for this. There's still a chance I could win this.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's 2 ways you can win. The first way is you post 5 fish whose total length beats everybody else, which is there's some competition there. The other way is we've got a second bracket where you can win just by simply catching the biggest fish, and to do that you only have to catch 1. Last year I caught almost a 22-inch fish out of obvious luck because I don't ever catch fish. So anybody can do it. And I think right now the longest fish is 22.5, which that's a big fish, but I mean it's not by any means a once-in-a-lifetime sized fish. So you guys need to get out there if you're interested in donating some money to a good cause. TakeMeFishing.org. We're going to be able to donate a couple $100 again this year because of everybody who signed up. So. Huge shout out to everybody. I do want to talk about one thing real quick. There's been a little bit of confusion on a couple cases here. If you want to participate, you do have to fish from a paddle sport vessel. We did allow an exception for inner tubes. A lot of bank fishermen have wanted to participate, and we came up with a middle ground. Buy yourself an inner tube. There are fishing inner tubes you can have for like $120, or you could just fish from a regular inner tube if you wanted to. Don't really care, but it's got to be done from a kayak, a paddle board, a canoe, or a inner tube, a floating tube of some way, shape, or form. Boats that are paddle powered do not count. So it has to be, the intent has to be, you power it with your feet or you power it with your hands. So yeah, just want to put that out there. We had some confusion there, and it cost somebody a really, really big fish. I hate to say it, but
yes.
He was a good sport about it, thank goodness, but broke my heart to reach out and be like, dude, I'm sorry, but
right.
Yeah, man. So it's been a good time, and we got to see your big buck, which is a monstrous deer, dude. I mean, you've got it on a barrel as the centerpiece, along with 2 other deer that you're mounting for your backyard, or not backyard, but your I don't know why I said that, for your house.
Yeah. It was good to get the buck back in my possession. Like I mentioned, Annie did a really good job. I got it back pretty darn quick. as normally I've had to wait about a year to get a buck back. So this was kind of a good change. And I've been working on a project with this pedestal mount that I bought and bourbon barrel that I fixed up. So I'm still working on it, tweaking it a little bit, but I think it's all going to come together. I've gotten a lot of compliments on it. So I should be, once I get it all done, I'll post a picture to social media so everybody can see what it looks like.
Yeah, man. It's a good thing. And on the topic of deer, we've got an episode tonight with Jason Redd. Jason Redd's been on the show. In fact, the last time we had him on was a little over a year ago. Jason Redd is the founder of Timber Ninja Outdoors, the carbon fiber tree climbing or the carbon fiber tree stick company, that is. And fantastic product, even better person behind the brand. And I know that Jason happens to be a wealth of knowledge with regard to hunting Western North Carolina. And while that doesn't sound like it makes sense or applies to you, there are some shocking similarities to Western North Carolina to a lot of the Southeastern United States. The habitat is relatively unproductive for whitetails. It's not managed very well, similarly to how we have abundant pines that don't exactly produce the best food for deer. They've got so tall of a canopy that it chokes out any kind of undergrowth, and so you have a low deer density there, similar to how we have in much of Florida. It's a very low deer density. The habitat's monotonous. The one advantage they have is they have good topographic features, but the hunting by no means is easy. And I think there's some lessons to be learned from Jason and the tidbits he shared on how he goes about thinking maybe a little more unorthodox about finding where the deer are.
I've been to North Carolina. It was, at least the part of North Carolina I was in, it was pretty hilly, a lot more elevation than Florida has. But I wasn't able to make this episode. It was you and him, so I'm looking forward to listening to this one and hoping to pick up any tips or tactics that Jason might have.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. I think you're going to enjoy it. I think everybody's going to benefit from this one. And also, I just kind of want to put out an invitation here for you guys. We are trying to highlight deer prep, specifically deer prep in the South, if we can identify some good guests. And if you have someone who you think consistently gets after big deer in the South, consistently is successful because of their preparation well before the season, we'd love to talk to them. So shoot us a DM or tell them that we're looking to talk to them. Connect us however it is you want to, and we'd be more than glad to have them on the show, because there's a lot of guys like Jason that fly under the radar. Unless you stumble upon them, you're not going to find them toting their tactics online, and they're not out there making YouTube channels, but there's a lot that they can offer, and I think this is one of those examples.
I've always kind of tried to mention to any of our listeners, hey, if you know somebody that would be a great podcast guest, introduce us to them so we can get them on the show. There's still a lot that I have to learn about deer hunting yourself. And we want to just try to find people that haven't necessarily been on 100 different podcasts and might bring something a little different to the table. So it'd be great if you guys could send some people our way.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of people, we couldn't do this podcast, which is for you people, without certain people's help. First and foremost, that's the Patreon members. Don't forget that we're doing a Q2 giveaway that includes a Browning cell camera and five Simmons trail cameras. Those are the non-cellular trail cameras, the ones that I used a lot this year. I really feel like they provide a real good bang for the buck, and the combination of the two, I think, is really going to help you sell out on wherever it is you're hunting, whether it's public, whether it's private. You heard Brett talk about selling out on areas. You've heard a lot of people talk about the use of trail cameras. They are an incredible tool that can be utilized to help you break down a piece of property in a way that has made me more successful, Chase more successful, and a lot of other people, but there's a science to it, so go back and listen to those episodes. But while you're listening, check out the link in the show notes, join Patreon. We'll enter you for a chance to win. Depending on what tier you're in, you get more or less entries. Depending on what tier you're in, you get a hat. You get added to the Marco Polo group, which is a group of about 20 people right now. That it's a really close community that shares information, gear tips. People help other people with issues that they have, whether it's a bow tune setup or trail camera use or picking out a kayak for the Yakkin For Bass challenge. It's a great group of people that really have a good time just enjoying the outdoors.
Love the Patreon community that we've built for the podcast. And you're right. I mean, pretty much, especially with the Marco Polo group, there's all kinds of questions that normally get asked, and pretty much there's always somebody that has an answer. So I think that's great. And if you're interested in something like that, then I hope you consider joining our Patreon.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we would be remiss if we didn't also tie in a really great product that'll help you take those trail cameras, take that body of knowledge that occurs inside the Marco Polo group and from the guests that we've had, and translate it to where you are. If you haven't already, we've done a couple episodes with the founder of Spartan Forge. Spartan Forge is AI learning for deer. What he's done is he's taken tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of data points of GPS deer, tagged in your area, overlaid every possible metric you can think of, from wind, humidity, altitude, whether or not there's pressure in the area, all kinds of different information. He's cleaned it up and he's made predictions with it, and we found that it's very, very intuitive. It really helps you make those decisions when you have tree stand picketitis, which is where you can't figure out where you're going in the morning before you leave. And on top of that, what you do with these trail cameras now is you're going to soon be able to query the information based on a spot, based on a location inside Spartan Forge. So as it is right now, it's a static thing where you look at the forecast for the next few days, but in the future you're going to be able to hit that historical data on your phone from the app, and you can take the trail camera information that you have, align it with what was going on that day, and start to pick out patterns. And I think this is a really, really awesome step for Spartan Forge. It's really going to help anybody who does long soaks like we do. And as those features continue to roll out, the cost of that product is going to increase upwards of $70 a year. Whereas right now, if you use the promo code Chasing Tails, you can get locked in for life for $20. And I really enjoy the idea of being able to leave my trail cameras in the woods for a long period of time. When the deer moves through, look at Spartan Forge and see if there's a correlation. And if there is, now I just feel equipped, and I will feel equipped at that point to really make strategic decisions.
Oh yeah. I think this Spartan Forge is a great app for the person that can't necessarily get out and scout all the time. I think it's going to be really wonderful for somebody like that. Because like you mentioned, all of the variables that it takes into place. There's even more coming with the app, which we kind of discussed before, which I think will be something that will really change the game for hunting as well. So if you are interested in something like this, then go ahead and get locked in for that $20.
Absolutely, man. Well, with that, we aren't going to waste any more words on this show, because you guys know, if you've listened before, I can talk until you guys just get exhausted of hearing my just harpy voice. So we're going to get you onto the show. I hope you enjoy this episode with Jason Redd. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have got a person on the line that I looked it up right before I called him. We haven't had him on since, March 16th of 2020, and that's an injustice to you guys, so I owe you an apology for not having this fella back on. We're talking to the founder of Timber Ninja Outdoors, Jason Redd. Dude, what is new in your world?
Not much. I would also call myself the janitor of Timber Ninja Outdoors. But yeah, thanks for having me back on, man. Not much going on here, man. Just, building sticks, hanging out, getting ready for some summer activities, and then gearing up for next season for hunting, man. I'm already pumped. I got a pretty nice whitetail season this year I'm excited about. So,
well, we had a fella by the name of Brett Mashburn. I am told you may be familiar with who that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was at our teach and train event the other day, and he did a demonstration with his little aider setup and what how he uses your aider with a Canader type situation. And man, there was I don't mean this in any competitive sense, but there was a true battle royale between the T1s that were there and your sticks, and it was just back and forth, man. It was cool to be at an event and see so many it's cool to see the hunting industry actually provide elite products. I feel like we just kind of get maybe I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but I feel like when we spend money, we tend not to get the same quality product that we get elsewhere. But you guys, Tether, there's some guys really bring in high quality products to the market, and it feels like when you spend that money, you're getting what you pay for.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'm not just saying that because we're talking about products, but I do feel like there are some people that that are starting to make things a little bit more advanced, just in the style of how they operate. I mean, if you look at most aluminum sticks, they've always looked the same to a degree, except for like, the hawks were a little different, but most everything else was built very similar. But now I think things are starting to get a lot more, I don't want to say futuristic, but they're looking a lot more modern than what we've came up with. So it's pretty cool. I mean, and that's what our goal is, to always to just push the boundary of innovation. That's, what we're doing with our other products as well. But, and Tether, they're doing that, and, other companies as well. And it's pretty awesome. And those teaching trains, man, they're solid events. I've had so many people reach out to me, from various ones they've been to around the region. I mean, I think most of them have been like Midwest, the Southeast, Southwest here recently, but it's just having consumers that are coming to just connect with other hunters, and bringing their gear and showing it. It's really paying off, man. Like I said, I've had a lot of people hit me up and place orders and stuff just based on our customers taking their stuff out there, and we're just humbled with the people that have done that. It's awesome. And Brent, he's an awesome dude, man. Like, I listen to his podcast, and I've talked to him a few times actually, and man, he's been getting it done with some deer too. Like I think he tagged out his first day in Missouri this year or something. I believe this first. Yeah. He's getting it, man. It's funny when it starts clicking for people, and you can pretty much take that same pattern and throw it in different areas, and that's regardless of the game, in my opinion. But once you start kind of figuring out how critters operate, I'm not gonna say it gets easy, but it gets a little bit easier to have opportunities. It's never easy to actually make it happen. Sometimes things go wrong there, but it does tend, after you start putting all the puzzle pieces together a little bit, you can start replicating that and getting opportunities at least.
Absolutely. And that's going to be the subject of today's podcast. You and I are going to kind of sit down. We're going to do a little highlight of Western North Carolina deer hunting in the Appalachian Mountains, that is. It's an area that has always intrigued me, being that I come from a place that, the elevation grade over 100 miles is about 10 feet of elevation change. It's one of those situations where I go up to where you guys are, and things start to make sense a lot more quickly. And I don't mean that in a demeaning way per se.
Right.
I'm not, it's not easy, but it's like, where you think deer are supposed to be, they tend to be. Whereas you don't have the geological or topographical features that do things, but where you hunt comes with its own inherent disadvantages as well. I mean, it seems like the more I talk to you and Tyler and Jordan, all members up there at Timber Ninja, I think actually we've had all three of you on the podcast too. Now that I think about it, when I talk to you guys, it seems like your deer density kind of suffers a little bit.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, of all the places I've hunted, I would say Western North Carolina is probably the lowest deer density I've ever experienced. So in the national forest that I hunt, there's 0.4 bucks killed per square mile. So, I mean, so that when you think about how many square miles we have, and and that's essentially averaged out, right? So it's like you a lot of times have to go a few miles before you can even find them. So yeah, I mean, that's our biggest struggle, is definitely the deer density. And to your point, once people start to understand hunting mountain country, and mountain country, in my opinion, varies from hill country. So, and we're talking about that, Appalachian mountain range, it's just different terrain, and, essentially animals somewhat, what all their main needs are, right? You just have to put it together based on the terrain. But I do agree a little bit about, like, the terrain makes them a little bit more predictable, rather than hunting like the swamps of Florida and stuff like that. And I grew up hunting river bottoms in the Mississippi Delta, which is low country, but there's still a little bit, there's a lot of stuff that kind of funnels the animals. I started hunting coastal South Carolina a few years ago, which I've talked to you about that a couple times. And it definitely is different, man, because like everything's board flat, and like I mean, you can look at different habitat, how it comes together, and things like that to kind of predict how the animals are going to move, or even like the coastal, the water coming up from the tides and stuff. Where I hunt, but it is a little different. But up here in the mountains, like if you can find the deer and you kind of figured it out, you have a good idea what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. But there's definitely it's not a turnkey like 1 or 2 year type skill to adapt, perfect. It definitely takes some time, and the key is finding them.
Yeah. So, gosh, there's so many different ways we could take this, and I had a script going into it, and now I just feel like I feel compelled to toss it out. But let's I feel like Coastal Carolina will be kind of similar. Let's kind of open that can a little bit. What has been your experience in that area? Have you found any success? I mean, like where do you feel like you are? You mentioned how when it starts to click, you start getting on deer. Has that started to happen in Coastal Carolina for you?
Yeah, I had a really good year the first year I hunted it. Like I saw a really good buck on this public piece, and um, and he was about 10 yards too far for me to get a shot on him. He was like 35 yards, and that's like 10 yards too far for me with my bow. But and then I went back last year. I've only been hunting that place 2 years, so last year I found a couple bucks, and it's just I bumped one out of his bed. Didn't get a good look at him, but I found a sign, knew he was a mature animal, and how he ran off through the swamp. I could just hear him. He was heavy. And I hunted him for the most of the time I was there. I only go down there and hunt like a week, and then I usually go down there for Thanksgiving, and it's essentially after it's post rut, so we're not running crazy. October would be the time I'd like to go, but I mean there are a lot more deer down there, and the WMA hunt there has some ag and stuff like that, so you can kind of funnel them in between bedding and food, which does help, and then just move around and look for those little isolated areas where those mature bucks are going to be hanging out. But one thing I did find about how this buck was using this place, there was a swamp. I was hunting right next to the swamp, and he had sign on both sides of the swamp. And it took me to the end of the trip to figure out what he was doing. He was actually crossing the swamp. And after I bumped him that day, and I saw his trail, because I set up on him on the other side of the swamp towards the end of my trip, had him come in on me before daylight, and heard him walk out through the swamp. And then when I got down that morning, that was the last morning I was hunting, I climbed up a tree and looked out in that swamp, and there was like a little high spot slap in the middle of that thing. And I'm pretty sure he was bedding right there. And I actually talked to Greg Litzinger about it, because he hunts a lot of swamps and marshes, and I was like, man, I think next year I'm going to try to, if that deer's still using that area and in that area, I was going to wade out in some chest waders and just step off his trail and try to catch him coming out. And it's a tactic that he's used and said it works pretty well. So that'd be pretty fun. It's just going to stand there in chest waders for a while, unless you had some type of huge marsh seed or something. I don't know.
You need one of those Hawk sells them. They've got like 3 paddles that basically spread out. They're duck hunting seats, and you just put it in the marsh mud, and it displaces your weight, and you can just sit there. That's what you need.
Oh, I have to look that up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try that. But if I go back in October, that's when gators and stuff are all out. So I don't know if I'm gonna be messing around in that swamp. But oh well. There's a lot of gators in there.
Yeah. Well, it's swamp.
Yeah.
Swamp in the south.
Swamp.
There's going to be gators.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it about the coastal stuff. I'm definitely a little bit more. I'm a white belt in swamp hunting. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
I'm figuring it out and getting on deer, but like I haven't killed one down there, and maybe this year I will. We'll see.
Okay, so let's bring that kind of full circle back to Western North Carolina. Let's give everybody a little bit of the backstory. How many years of experience do you have in that area?
I've been here for 12 years, and since I moved here, I started hunting here, and then that's really what led me into going to other mountainous East Coast regions of the Appalachian chain. So I've hunted Southern Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina, and Tennessee, all in that range in Kentucky. I forgot about Kentucky. So, all the hill countries that are kind of like all part of the Appalachian range.
Now, all of those states are not equal with regards to mountains. I am told that aside from Western North Carolina, that West Virginia is probably the most intense of them. What kind of physical exertion are we looking at in the areas you hunt in Western North Carolina?
Western North Carolina is, we have the biggest mountains on the East Coast. We have Mount Mitchell here, which is like 25 miles from my house. So it's 6,300 feet. So, I mean, you're starting to kiss higher elevation, like some of these areas in those areas you're getting a little bit above tree line for the East Coast. And so, it's very steep, rugged, old mature forest. Most places like you have, you're 10, 15 miles from any type of private agriculture or anything like that. So it's big woods, steep mountain hunting, and then that's the areas I prefer to hunt personally. And same thing. West Virginia is a little different. The mountains aren't as high, but they're real steep and sharp. Here, the Appalachian Range itself, it's a very old mountain range. Like some geologists say that essentially at one time Mount Mitchell was higher than Mount Everest. So it was a big range. It's essentially been weathered down over thousands of years, and so it's big here. And like West Virginia is more like, where I hunt anyway, is like a lot of really steep, rugged, just up and down, like shark fin ridges is what I would call it. They're not as high. And so like, as far as putting in an effort, yeah, you have to, get after it for a little bit, but like, it's not as long. Like some of the climbs and, where I hunt, if I come in from the top, which sometimes I have to, just because that's the only access I have, or I have to come in, 7 to 14 miles from another trailhead down below. You just have to, you'll have to walk a mile or two back out of this place, gaining, 1,000, 1,200 feet elevation. So it's not fun. I think it's fun, but it's like, like if you're not ready for it, you definitely can get kicked in the teeth.
Yeah, I think so. Through talking to you offline before this podcast, you got a low deer density. Tyler would argue severely mismanaged forest, so food sources aren't abundant. If you have a bumper acorn crop, it's both a blessing and a curse in the sense that it's a bumper acorn crop, and so the deer are everywhere. If you don't, then vice versa, all the deer get concentrated. You have to find them. I hear a lot of similarities between here in Florida and a lot of the Southeastern areas. What do you think has been key for you in navigating an area like that?
As far as like having success and opportunities.
Sure. I mean, I think maybe we could break this down into almost two parts, though, right? You could almost say just simply getting on deer consistently, and then is there any tier or steps you had to take it beyond that to get on a different age class?
Yeah, well, I mean, starting out, I really knew nothing. I mean, like I said, I grew up living in the Mississippi Delta, so completely different landscape and how I hunted. And when I moved here, like I was having a really hard time at first trying to find any deer. And because I was hunting low, I was going to these places that look real pretty, but essentially didn't have the mountain habitat to hold deer. Based on things that you're talking about, food sources, cover, water, all these things. And so I was like looking low in all these pretty open spots. And then, I started venturing higher in the mountains and bumping more deer up around these laurel and rhododendron thickets, which, that's one of our best sources of cover up here for bedding is like laurel and rhododendron, because we don't have a lot of cuts, based, you're saying about Tyler talking about, how the forest is managed. So we don't have a lot of timber cuts. So, primarily one of our main sources of bedding is is laurel and rhododendron thickets. So I never would have thought animals would be living in this stuff, and it's such a pain to get in. But like the higher I went up the mountain, I started seeing a little bit more deer sign in certain areas, and I started focusing around that. The thing is like it, in my opinion, it's almost easier here to like focus on killing a mature buck than it is sometimes to kill any deer, because most of the time, when I find a buck, that's mainly the only deer I may see, to be honest with you. And it took me some time to figure out where these older bucks like to hang out, and you have to cover tons of country to find them. I mean, but then once you start figuring it out, you can start looking at maps and crossing some places off, and then going in, and you have a higher success rate because, like I said, I mean, Pisgah National Forest is like, I think, 275,000 acres. So I mean, it's a big tract of country to cover. But yeah, once I started figuring out where, and I killed some small deer when I first moved here, and then I started finding bigger deer. Because at first I didn't even know we had big deer here. Because if you talk to anybody, like there wasn't many folks killing big deer when I first moved here. But it does get better every year, and I don't know if that's because our population is growing, or just more people are starting to come back to hunt the mountains like they used to, because we used to have a really decent deer density back in like in the 80s, 70s and 80s, and it was kind of a sought after place to hunt. But then the deer density started going down, and there's a lot of poaching going on, there's all these things, and people started moving away and not hunting the public lands. They were going and getting leases in Virginia and South Carolina and places like that.
So it kind of seems like in order to get on bucks, you almost have to sell out entirely to go after a certain age class, right? I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is you get one or two opportunities, and they tend to be a mature deer.
Yeah, I mean, there's some areas like some WMAs that we have close by that they do some management with food plots and things like that, and they tend to hold a little bit more deer. But the thing is, they're also going to hold a lot of people, and they're not really big tracts either. So you're going to be bumping in a lot of people. And my style of hunting, no matter where I go, is I want to find less people regardless of how many deer there are. Like if there are deer in an area and there's not that many people, you have a really good chance of finding a mature deer. So I really like to take that gamble personally. And so that's what I do around here. Like, yeah, I could go down to some of these WMAs and, bump into people all the time and, be able to whack a bunch of does, or, maybe get a decent buck or see some smaller bucks. But, I think your time's better spent getting up in the mountains and doing a lot of scouting and finding some areas that are holding deer, and just really, focusing, just laser focused on those, those specific areas and finding that deer. Because there's most of the spots I hunt, I rarely run into people. And I picked up a guy last year on one of my trail cameras in one of these spots, and it shocked me if there was a guy hunting back there, honestly. And to be frank, I kind of think it was a guy. He looked like a guy that I know that I think knows where I hunt, that based on some pictures that I've posted on social media. And so I don't know. I think maybe a little bit of that happened.
Interesting. I'm a big fan of hunting up there because it poses different challenges. We went up and hunted for turkey. God, it feels like it was years ago, but it was probably only a couple weeks. And when we were there, it was one of those things where the animals just act different. You're talking about going high to get to the rhododendron, to get to the cover. My first thought would have been to get low, because that's just where I find them here, is down in the bottoms. Yes, again, it's a 20-foot elevation change, but you don't find them up on the tops. They're down in the bottoms. And so it's interesting to me the turkeys did similar things. Like I told my little brother, I'm like, listen, that's too steep. The turkey's going to come up this road, right? This nice gravel road. The turkey's going to come up at least past least resistance. And to me, the path of least resistance was the gravel road. and the turkey's like, he'll be damned, and just popped the hubs in 4-wheel drive and just came right over the top and was right on top of us. This happened to us literally several times. The whole adage, a turkey won't cross a creek. Well, in the mountains they don't care about the creeks. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, they'll fly over in a second.
and so
Yeah.
it's interesting to me, and it's a challenge that one day I plan on taking on, just because I think it would be an absolute blast to try and diversify, because I don't think anything bad can come from trying to uh, increase how you approach whitetails, right? Like having flexibility of thought, which I think getting too rigid and this is how I do it, this is what I'm looking for, growing your skill set, I think is valuable as an outdoorsman.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, and another thing is like, hunting the mountains, like personally, like that's the really, besides doing the stuff down the coast a little bit, and it's just because I have a house down there and we go there for Thanksgiving and like I want to hunt during Thanksgiving. Um, like it wouldn't be somewhere that I sought after, sought out, sorry, to go hunt. I just love hunting the mountains because even a bad day in the mountains, you get to live and, take in these views and this type of country that's, I'm very fortunate because I live here, but, for a lot of people that want to travel out and do these types of hunts, like it's, there's some breathtaking experience just in nature. And these hunts are, in these bigger national forest tracks, like they're an adventure. But and like you said earlier, like the, a whitetail is the most adaptable species of the deer herd, in my opinion. I mean, you look at how many different ranges whitetails live in. They live in low country, in the swamps where you live. They live in the mountain deserts, because essentially a Coues deer is a whitetail. And they live in the mountains where we live, and like they live in the suburbs. Like they can adapt to their environment so easy. So like up here, yeah, man, like sometimes I want to say like some of these bucks up here, like, one side of their legs is shorter than the other because they side hill these steep ridges all the time, Um, but like, I mean, I agree. Like there's some spots that I've found bucks in and being able to kill bucks in that I wouldn't have thought a deer would be navigating through just because like, boulder fields and things like that. But, you know, they, you just, once you kind of figure out the terrain, you can figure out how they're moving through it. And it definitely, can make it a lot easier, but, you just got to spend the time of putting, it's a lot of footwork, man. And, I am a big advocate in that, if you find a deer, like a buck using an area and you kill him, if he's a mature animal, I think another buck's always going to come take him and take over that spot because, some of the ones that I've killed, I've had pictures of them being bachelored up, and then they split up. So he more than likely runs them out of his range, right? So when he gets killed out, another subordinate's primarily, going to take over that area. So you can be repetitive in some of these areas. And I've been, a lot of the areas I hunt, like I've had successful, success based on that. Cause like I found where they were living because the habitat was there. Like we were talking about earlier, like the habitats can be pretty scarce to have all these things that make the conditions right to hold mature age class animals, like food, like, mass is one part up here, but then you also need to find some successional growth, low stem count stuff. You got to have the cover. And if you have big mature woods, the only cover you have is, like I was talking about earlier, is laurel thickets and then having water. I tend to find a lot of my bucks pretty close to like where creeks start out, like creek heads. And usually the vegetation is a lot more lush in there. So like I think that has something to do with it. Also, it's an easy water source. And usually there's laurel thickets around. So that when I see all those things come together, I'm always, going in there and putting some time in to see if I find any mature bucks on.
So I hear you kind of dancing around the different things you're looking for. If you had to like summarize your tactics, what would you say they are?
Well, usually when I find a deer, I usually find him one year and I either kill him the next or 2 years after. It's, I usually find them, and how I do that is, I mean, it's taken some time, but I'll find a buck, get them on camera, like say the previous year, just because I let some cameras soak all through deer season, and I use them for inventory more than anything. And I will find that deer, and I usually pull my cameras or pull my cards in turkey season, because like some of these areas are, a pain to get back into. So I have to have a purpose to go in there. Someone can be 3-4 miles deep. So I'll let those cameras soak during deer season. Let me back up. I'll put them out during rifle season, because I like to use rifle season as a time to still hunt through bigger tracts of country. And I really enjoy doing that. It's fun. And, I've gotten lucky and been able to kill a few, decent bucks just by hunting off the ground and slowly moving around and scouting. And what I'm doing is I'm scouting also for, either the next year or our late archery season, because I really enjoy our late archery season up here in December. But I'll put out cameras then, and then if I even don't go back into that spot during deer season, I'll go back during turkey season and pull cameras, and then I'll take an inventory of what's been coming through there, see if there's something I'm interested in, and then turkey season and a little bit some in the summer, I'll deploy more cameras and start scouting. And then, come late summer, late July, August, I run cameras a little bit more aggressively to see what's really in there, because our season opens early September. So I like to try to take an opportunity in early season for that. But it's like every season's kind of the same for me. Like I'll find a deer I'm focused on. I'll see if I can kill him in early season. If that doesn't work out, I'll transition, and I usually go hunt in the Midwest in November, and then I come back home and start hunting with my rifle again around Thanksgiving, and then, like I said, that I'm pulling intel based on either that deer I'm hunting or looking for another buck to hunt late season, because in December, the last 2 mature bucks I've killed one December 18th, and then last year I killed one on Christmas.
Wow. So legitimate, like late season. Okay, so most people talk about late season whitetails and how they get on them. The recipe is typically pretty simple. Find a soybean field full of soybeans. When the first freezing snow sleet storm gets here, get on a popular travel corridor. Are there food sources in particular that you've identified late season, like Nuttall Oaks or something like that, or are you still just going back to those dense areas that that those deer habit?
I think that's when the mature bucks are up here looking for those younger does.
Okay.
It's like a quintessential second rut, what some people may call it. Because I get rut activity up here on cameras all the way into February.
Wow.
Checking scrapes, and I know, like, for instance, Jordan saw a fawn last year. I want to say it was middle October, and it still had spots all the way up its neck. So, that kind of shows, like, I think our rut's a little different. So, like, I think early season for me, the times that I really try to kill a mature buck I'm focused on is early season or that late archery season. It's like what I really put the most attention to here. And then during, when our typical rut supposedly starts, which is around Thanksgiving, that's when I'm just covering country with my rifle and seeing if I slip up on something, or, like I said, gathering intel for late season or even the following season.
That makes sense. I'm surprised to hear that a stick bow fellow like yourself would pick up the rifle. I mean, that seems. Are they going to like excommunicate you from the traditional archery? What is it? What is it?
Man, I think it makes me like my rifle a little bit more sometimes. Like I went for a number of years where I wouldn't rifle hunt. Like I hadn't, turned my nose up to rifle hunting because I was a bow hunter or whatever. But man, I don't know. I just love getting a rifle and walking around the woods and shooting. Like I rarely hunt out elevated. If I do, it's only like one stick or something like that. Just kind of get up to see over a laurel thicket or something. I just love covering country and hunting off the ground, and it's worked out with me. It worked out for me multiple times too, like killing decent deer. I haven't killed a monster that way yet, but I've killed some good deer. And I'm usually using that, like I said, it's like I like to go into new tracks that I kind of have my eye on and just cover a bunch of country with the rifle. And sometimes going in there, like, it just depends on like how the mood hits you. Like I killed a younger buck this year on a hunt like that with my rifle. Just went in and check out this new spot, and they happened to be rutting there like crazy. And funny part, I missed a really good buck at like 15 yards neck shot. And I mean, I just killed a buck in Virginia 2 weeks later, shot him in the neck at like 30 yards. And this one ran up on me chasing a doe. And I haven't told many people the story besides like, Jordan and them. And this like really good buck runs up on me and chasing this doe, and he stops like 15, 18 yards, something like that. And I put on his neck, and it's like, pretty much knew he was done. She pulled the trigger, and he just stood there. And I was like, "Jeez, what happened?" And he jumped, and I racked my bolt, and he stopped broadside at about 25 yards, and I put it on him, dead on him, and click. I didn't pull my boat back far enough to like it kicked the bullet out, but didn't engage another bullet. Yeah. And then so I was like, "Geez," I was like really pissed off, and then I was sitting there, I put a bullet in my gun, and then I hear something coming, and I hear a deer grunting, and I like got ready, and it was like a, like a 2-year-old buck, and shot him right in the neck, right? He pretty much stopped in the same tracks at that other buck that I'd missed, and I shot him in the neck, and he dropped his tracks. So I don't know what happened, man. I'm confident it wasn't buck fever. I just think some deer have, they have somebody watching after him, but I know where he's at. Like I put a lot of time in on him because there's another really good buck in there based on the sign that this deer I don't think was capable of making. And the deer that I missed, he was an 18-inch, tall, 8-point, like real good looking deer, like especially going into a new spot. But there was some sign in there that was laid down by a real deer, and and this deer, he can make a good jump next year. So I definitely put a lot of time in there this spring, and had a bunch of cameras in there looking this space out.
Yeah, I imagine so. My Weatherby, no, it's not a Weatherby. It's a Winchester does the same thing. There's all the other bolt action rifles I have, by the time it ejects the shell, it's close enough to engage. But with my Model 70, it's the same thing. If you rack the chamber too quickly, and I noticed that there's this distinct audible click or tink that just occurs when it goes all the way back. And so I sat in the living room one day and I just racked the bolt several times until I had that audible, like muscle memory, because I did the same thing. Deer hunting, I did the exact same thing. Took a shot, went to rack it, and click, and I was just like heartbroken. I was like, how could I have had a misfire? And then to pull it back and add insult to injury, it's not a misfire. you didn't do your job.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess to my credit, I've never had to shoot more than once. So
there you go.
But no, I mean, I enjoy that. I enjoy the rifle hunts and a little bit, but I really love hunting with my stick bow. That's the thing that really gets me going, and that's I killed my buck on Christmas this year. I killed him with a stick bow, and it's really awesome. But but talking earlier, you're talking about hunting these pretty bottoms and stuff like that. Now, don't get me wrong, the bucks come down there and use that. Obviously, I mean, you're going to have a chance at seeing more deer probably down those lower regions, but your mature deer are going to be up higher. 90, in my opinion, 90+% of the time in the mountains, you're going to find them up higher. But you'll find their sign down low, but there's just not the right cover and terrain to really hold them and make them feel safe. My thing is we have a lot of big primary ridges here, and I'm a huge fan of hunting. I hunt finger ridges. So, you got a primary ridge that has finger ridges coming off, and I look at those finger ridges and put together those habitat keys I was talking about earlier, with the creek heads and, good laurel thickets. And I find those areas, that's where I'm gonna be focused on. And ideally, I'm a big believer in hunting these deer in their beds. But it they have a few ways to go out of them, based on the wind. And so like, I can't always guarantee I'm gonna kill him. And, you always don't know if he's there unless, you use cell cams, which I don't use many of those. They don't really work very well up here because of our terrain. And, honestly, with cameras in general, like, I have a hard time with cameras just based on the bears. Bears take out, I'd say, 40-50% of my cameras every year.
So how big of a role do those play for you in that, with that in mind? I mean, trail cameras for me are everything. I especially where I'm at, I have to identify dense pockets of deer. With that being said, I mean, how does that still factor in?
I mean, I use them a lot for inventory purposes, and then I will try to, if I find a bed, I will position cameras in multiple areas around that bed to see, what trails he's using. And then I start hunting that deer in his bed. And, I'm a big fan of hunting an animal on a wind that favors him more than me. I'm really big on hunting just a little bit off wind. And it's a gamble though, like I was talking to my buddy Nathan Killen, which he's a big mountain hunter, like very well, a heck of a lot more successful than I am. He's been doing it for a long time. He grew up here, but that was something I started doing. That's something he does some of himself too, is hunting these off winds. So essentially, you have a wind that's going back into that deer that favors him for the use, but you just play just off of it. You have a short little window of opportunity to get a shot off on these animals in that. And the thing for me is that doing that, I have a really high success rate when conditions are right to at least have an opportunity. And I'm willing to gamble that, because if you're always playing the win in your benefit, like it's not benefiting him, there's a good chance you're not going to see that animal, whereas if you play it in his favor and you just gamble that off wind, you're at least going to see him. And a lot of times, if you set up properly, you're going to get a shot on him. I mean, that's how I killed a buck this year. I killed, the big deer I killed in, what was that, 18? Yeah, 18. It killed him that way. I've had multiple opportunities. I had 2 opportunities last year on other mature deer that I got busted doing the same thing. One of them was a really big deer I was hunting. I think I've shown you pictures of him. He was, for up here, he's like probably, I would say, a 140 class 8-point, just a stud of a deer. And I set up on him this year like that, and he came in, but he had a doe in front of him, and I had my thermals breaking right off this finger ridge, like towards the point, and I knew they were coming down this finger ridge and crossing it to go to this laurel thicket, and it worked out like a charm. But the doe was in front of him, and she caught my thermals before he stepped into the hole, because when you're hunting these laurel thickets like that, it's really thick and you only have really small openings to get a shot off. And like, he was just about to step into the opening. I mean, like, all he got to do is take one more step and I would get him, get a shot off. But she caught my wind or my thermals and blew, and he just ran off with her, without even looking.
What's a like heartbreakingly large buck for up there, right? Like if that were to happen, let's say that second trigger pull was the empty round was a really big deer that would have kept you up at night. What does that look like for Western North Carolina?
Like, I mean, as far as what I've seen, like that deer, he's up there. I mean, like I said, he's 100, I say 140. He's a high 130, 140 class deer, which is a good deer for up here. But I saw one in 19. I was hunting this really nice 10 point, and it was early season, early October, and I knew where these deer were or this buck was bedding, and I knew that I didn't know this specific buck was bedding there, but I knew there was a mature buck using this bed, and I had this big 10 point coming through that I had on camera, and I set up one day coming off. They were side hilling. It was like a east facing finger ridge, and they were side hilling, leaving that point, coming back around and crossing the top of this creek. And that day I set up, there was a big mature, I want to say, I think it was an oak that had fallen down. So it created this root ball. And I was just hanging out in that root ball. And I was set up kind of neutral because there'd also been some activity coming from my left and the right. So I wanted to be set up either way. And I should have went with my gut and just essentially set up for him coming off that point. But I wasn't that confident and just thought, wouldn't listen to my gut, which is something that has proved me wrong so many times. And anyway, long story short, about 5:30, but I had a bear come in, and she had some cubs. She saw me. The cubs were like, I don't know, 15 yards from me. She started woofing and popping and doing some crazy stuff. And I was like, I didn't want to yell because I had a gut feeling, a buck was in the area because it was based off the trail camera pictures. And I didn't want to yell at her, but I was kind of like moving my bow and just like, get out of here. And finally she just did her thing and left. And after that, I was looking at these birds. There was just like this big mass of birds, like little small birds flying around. And I was looking at them, and I caught some movement outside my corner of my eye. And I looked down, and right where that bear came from, there was just this stud of a buck. I had no history of him, and he was way bigger than the 10 that I was hunting. And the buck that I killed in 18, I could have set his horns down inside this deer's horn. So just a quick glance, like he was easy a 140 class deer. It's beautiful chocolate horns, something you don't see here that much. And he didn't know I was there, but like I think he had smelt that bear, and he was just on edge, so he was already really alert and looking kind of in my direction, because that's where that bear had been. And I could never really get a drawn on him, and he really needed to step into one more step into this hole. But I had like a really small window, and he started, doing the thing they like to do. They started moving his ears, and he started to back step, and I knew he was about to leave. So I drew real quick and tried to take a snapshot with my recurve and shot right over him. But I would say, that deer was at least 140 to 150. And that's a true stud up here. I mean, there's been some 160s killed in the last few years up here, but they're few and far. But my taxidermist says that about 8 years ago, his average buck that came in was like 115 inches, and he said that it's starting to go up now. Like we're starting to get more of like 140 class, 150 class deer getting killed. Like some of these coming off private land, don't get me wrong, but they're still close to the public. So I don't know of any boone crockett deer being killed up here, but I would say in the next few years we're going to get pretty close to it.
Yeah, that's grown, man. I mean, I have to drive to Georgia to consistently get on anything above 80 inches.
Yeah.
It's funny how a slight tweak in where you are makes such a difference, right? I mean, like 45 minutes north of me, relatively, I mean, we're still talking coastal plain, right? The soil's not great. There's a little more agriculture up there, a little bit, not a whole lot. A little bit better soil, not a whole lot. The amount of deer is out of this world. The quality of deer is immediately better. I mean, it's funny how just a slight tweak can have those impacts, and I imagine that potential that you have up there is only going to increase as they start to manage that timber. I know that's something Tyler's really excited about.
Yeah, I think so, man. I mean, but I still think that in the size of the horns I see are better the higher I go up. And I don't know what, and actually Nathan and I were talking about this when we were doing a scouting trip in Virginia, because he finds the same thing in Southwest Virginia is that, the antler size on the same age class of deer tends to be bigger, in the higher elevation ranges, which their elevations are pretty close to ours. And in, there's some, this gentleman's theory is like the survival of the fittest, the strongest survive in these harsher environments. And so therefore those genetics get passed on. And, there's no true science behind that, but it does make sense. If he's seeing that and I'm seeing that, it's, it is interesting. So I think, your opportunity to find those bigger deer, man, like if you just put the time in, the higher up and deeper, rougher country, they got things to live off, they got food to live off up there. You know what I mean? Like these suckers will eat mushrooms, they'll eat ferns, they'll eat rhododendron, laurel, if it gets really rough, they'll eat those laurel buds and stuff. And then there is some, mass up there. So they know how to make it work.
Yeah, I think there's like those deer that just have up there have. My little brother said, shit up here is just built different, and it's true. I mean, it's just they're a survivor, they're a tougher. I have immense respect for people like you who actually enjoy it and consistently stay after it, because I feel like there's a different sense of adventure, and it's a lot of type 2 fun, I believe. And it's just I see why people avoid it, because where we were isn't near as bad as where you're at. We were able to get on deer fairly consistently. The biggest buck I've ever drawn back on was up in North Georgia. But I'm curious, what have you learned from Western North Carolina that translates to like the coastal plain or other places?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that makes a person more successful is persistence. You just have to be persistent. Like, it's really hard, and I think there's a lot of luck that goes into it for these people that get to go into an area and kill something in the first weekend that they're there, especially like if it's an area that has zero history in. Like what really plays out is persistence and knowledge. So if you understand how these animals use habitat, and they all need the same things to survive, and you can kind of work. I mean, this goes for elk or anything else. Like if you put the information that you have to chase any critter together, like you can translate that to any place that you go. So like, I mean, same thing with when I go hunt elk, like I like to hunt elk right before the primary rut and catch them when they're like just starting to get a little bit, livened up, but still kind of stay in their home range. And usually those, bigger elk that I've ran into, they're higher up the mountain. And, so I use that same philosophy I use out here to find elk. And, when I go to Ohio or anywhere else, it's essentially the same thing. But I think the key is persistence and having a good attitude, because, if especially like hunting around here, for instance, like if you go 20 days without seeing a deer, but you have to be confident and have a good attitude to stay there, because, he's going to move at some time. I mean, some of these deer, these mature bucks, it may be 8 days before they come back through, an area that that you have some history with them on, in daylight, because it takes them that amount of time to make their rounds. But you can hunt these areas a little bit more consistently than you would some other areas, because the deer aren't moving through them so much, so you're not going to lay down as much scent. But persistence is key. You really have to do a lot of scouting. I mean, as I've gotten older and learning more, and talking to people that are way more successful than I am, the one common factor that I find from all of them is that they do a lot of postseason scouting. Um, they really know what's going on. They know every piece of that country, what deer are in there, and that gives them a lot more ideas of, where that deer can be when it becomes, if they're not finding it, exactly where they think they thought they were going to find them. They have a good backup plan.
We had Brett on recently, and he was talking about how he sells out to an area. Jake Bush hunts the mountains or hill country of Ohio, and he tends to sell out to an area and put out a lot of miles, breaking down an area. And there seems to be a consistent theme that happens where it's a year-round pursuit, it's a year-round thought process. It never really leaves the back of your mind. You might go fishing with your wife, you may go turkey hunting, but you're kind of always kind of cataloging or maybe crossing those over where applicable to where you can scout and turkey hunt and do stuff like that. And so it seems like you're right that the guys who get it done on those extraordinary deer have to put in an extraordinary effort kind of year round.
Yeah, well, some of the areas that I hunt that aren't, around my house, when I go to Virginia or West Virginia or Ohio or anywhere like that, like I don't have that amount of time to put in scouting, so and I love that style of hunting too. I go in and I use the same tactics and knowledge of where I found deer, terrain features and stuff at home, and I apply it to these areas to like have a lot of, pins dropped. But when I go in some of these areas blind like that, I'm going to cover so much country until I find hot, mature buck sign before I ever hang a stand or put any time into hunting that area. Like Heath and I hunted in Ohio last year, and I don't know, I think we covered 15, 20 miles in a few days before we like found it where we really wanted to hunt. Like we did some like just found some decent sign or some decent terrain features and like set up for like an hour or two, but then we would in those first few days, but then we'd get down and start covering country until we found something really good. And by, I think it was day 3, and Jordan came in that weekend on Sunday after we'd been there, and everything was working out perfectly as far as, temperature and timing. This was November the 1st was the first day that when Jordan got there that we all hunted. But after we put all that time in, we saw 3 bucks on November the 1st. Each one of us saw a buck that morning, and the smallest one was like 140 class. So you just got to cover that country and use that information that you have, and just don't get so stressed out, especially on these rut trips. If you don't have information on these areas, don't get stressed out because you're not in a tree. Like there's no reason to burn a sit. It's it's better to scout than to burn a sit just to be in a tree.
Yeah, I agree, man. Well, what do you when we teed this topic up? Were there any pieces that you wanted to touch on that we didn't cover in the natural course of the dialogue?
People that want to hunt that way, if they're not already hunting that way, one of the big things is you got to be in shape. Like a lot of guys are really getting into mountain hunting, or like they have interest in it, but like if you've never been in the mountains and walked up some of these ridges, like if you're not in shape, you're not going to have a good time. Like you're not going to you're not going to cover the country you want to, and ultimately, if you do kill something, you maybe have a hard time getting it out. But it would be a really fun adventure. Like doing an all-nighter trying to get a buck out. But put in the time, get fit for it, have all the gear that you need. Like, because you're going to be packing animals out, so you need to be prepared to do that, and just have a good time doing it.
Yeah, for sure. I think keeping a good attitude about it all, making sure it stays fun, is important. One of the things that I did last year to do that was I picked the rifle back up. And a lot of the areas that I had to hunt were not super suitable for bow hunting. And so as a result, I found myself getting frustrated by that. And they were still my best options. And so I picked up the rifle and started, doing the Western thing where I would, pop up over a little ridge hill, glass down into the bottom, sit there for a little bit till I felt like, I had a good pulse on the area. Nothing's moving. All right, time to move. Go on to the next area. And, that was kind of like a shot in the arm, and it was a lot more fun that way, for sure.
Oh yeah, man. Like that's another good hunt to do. I've done some solo backpack hunts, just doing like point to point type stuff. And I actually have some plans to do some more this year. I didn't do any last year, but going out and, when you have these big tracks like that, you can turn them into like a Western style experience. You could spend a couple days in the backcountry with your buddies and just, do a shuttle system, drop a vehicle off at one area, and then everybody drive back, and you start this area and you just like cover a bunch of country, like, spike camping every night. Like that's a really fun adventure that you can have. And using a rifle, is the way to do that, in my opinion, because usually it's going to be deer in the rut, and you can have just a really fun backcountry experience on the East Coast by, using that type of strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something my little brother and I are talking about doing. We found an entire swath of probably close to 5,000 acres that when we went down all the roads and we did the dance, we found that there was no tree stands, there were no trail markers, there weren't any of that stuff, and it's kind of difficult to get back in there to begin with. And then when you get in there, there's no easy way to get anything out. And we found bear, we found deer, we found turkey. We had a blast doing it, and so like immediately it got the wheels going. And Duncan and I are like, okay, listen, we didn't see any kind of historical sign in this little bottom here. We could probably use this as a camp and not blow anything out of these bottoms. Oh, I bet you we could go over here and do the same thing. And then there's the creek side over there. We could go do the same thing. And so it's one of those things where it very quickly is becoming one of those like, well, can't go to Colorado this year. What do you think about bombing off into the national forest for 7 days and just pinging back in periodically to check cell service if you need to, climb up to the top of the mountain, but in the meantime, let's just go off the grid like we would, out west. I mean, it's a rare thing in the Southeast.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's totally doable. I mean, there's tracks in Virginia, West North Carolina and Georgia. You could totally make that happen. And most of these areas, since a lot of your listener base is primarily the Southeast, like that's something that's really within reach. And like, I've talked about this on another podcast before, is like, it's a really good, like, prerequisite for people that are wanting to go out west. So at least you can go, and it's, essentially it's lower commitment, but you can get your systems dialed as far as your camping gear and, what you're going to need. And if you do get an animal down, you've never butchered an animal in the field, like you can have that experience before you go tackle like an elk. And it gets to be, completely different situation because you're dealing with a bigger animal. But yeah, man, it's a great adventure to have. And there's tons of them. And I think the more time people do that, they'd really appreciate it even more,
Absolutely, for sure. It'd be a great way to prepare for the Midwest, or not for the Midwest. Geez, all you need is some Spam and a heater, and you're okay in the Midwest. But it'd be a great way to prepare for Colorado. Everything with aside from the lack of oxygen, there's nothing I can do for you on that one.
No. Altitude affects everybody differently, man. Like I've been at altitude numerous times, and no matter how you prepare for it, sometimes it hits you and sometimes it doesn't.
That's right.
I like to get true altitude sickness. I've been fortunate. I haven't really gotten it once, but I've witnessed it a lot with some buddies. It's not a fun time.
That's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you cutting out an hour. We played tag a couple times there, had to try and reschedule, and I appreciate you carving time out your evening to chat with us. Why don't you kind of give everybody a reminder of where they can find everything Timber Ninja?
Well, you can find us online at timberninjaoutdoors.com. That's our website. And then on social media, it's Timber Ninja Outdoors, which we're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We have some YouTube videos. Sorry, I just had my dog come in here.
Hey, it's an outdoor podcast. It's an outdoor dog, dude. It's all good, man.
Yeah,
Guys, listen. If the deer hunting is kicking off, we're talking about the deer hunting prep. We're getting ready for it. There are all kinds of places. Jason said it earlier. Our main base is the Southeast. There's all kinds of adventures you can go on right here in the Southeast. Sure, the Midwest is always an attractive option, but we're going to start diving into some Southeastern content. We're going to start bringing you guys in the Southeast who get it done. Where it may apply to you. I know we have a big base up in North Georgia of listeners, so you guys, this one applied directly to you. And if there's somebody you'd like to hear, send us a message, shoot us a DM. We'd love to have you, or we'd love to have them on, and make sure you guys are hearing from the people you're interested in hearing from. But do me a favor, no matter what you do, get outside and enjoy the great outdoors.